There's a few videos out there showing how to calculate how much thread you need for a project for shuttle tatting. Shuttle tatting is, to me, very easy because you just load up your shuttle and you don't have to worry about enough working yarn on a needle. And I usually just load up my shuttle, and it's easy to add thread in a project if you run out. And same thing with the needle. If you can only go a maximum of needle length for a project before it gets unmanageable and gets tangled and stuff. So I have a maximum. I usually go about a yard for my needle thread. But if you want to see if you have enough, if you're just doing a small motif, you don't want to waste a lot of needle thread. So you do have to have enough working yarn to maneuver your needle in and out. So I usually do a little bit longer than my needle. And then this would be considered the part that I'm actually going to use for the project. But just to calculate out, I've already got my needle threaded. I'm going to put some marks on here in 4 10-inch sections, and I'll probably see if I can stay in the camera a little bit here. Turn this up a little bit. Sorry about that. I'm just using my cutting mat here, so I don't want to unthread my needle. So I'm going to measure 10 inches just so I have some reference points. And I'm just going to take a Sharpie and put a dot right on the thread. So just do this with the size thread that you're wanting to calculate your project. This is a number 10 crochet cotton that I got from Hobby Lobby. And so I'm going to do another mark 10 inches away. And that's going to be the 2 dots that I'm going to use for my needle thread. Then I'm going to do another 10 inches, and this is going to be the measurements that I use for my ball thread. So I'm going to go ahead and do a dot for 10 inches. And I might just do another one. I don't think I'll get into the second one, but that'll give me 20 inches for the needle thread and 20 inches for the ball thread. So if you're doing mock rings, you're going to be using up a lot of the ball thread. If you're using true rings, you're going to be using up a lot of the needle thread. So I've got all my sections. I've got 2 sections of 10 inches for my needle thread and 2 sections for my ball thread. So I'm going to take this tail and I'm going to put my eye of the needle at that first black mark, because this is going to be the tail that I use to help me maneuver my needle. But I'm going to start my first stitch at that second black mark. So this total is 20 inches here on my needle. So I'm going to put my needle right on that second black mark, and I'm going to start making stitches. So I'm going to, just to make it easy, going to make 10 stitch ring and a 10 stitch chain. I might add a little picot in there. That'll take up about 2 stitches for that. Depends on how big your picot is. And to do this, you don't really need to do picots, but when you're counting up your pattern, you need to count the picots depending on how big they are. It's just going to slow me down to do the picots. So that's 4, 5. So that's a 10 stitch ring. It's going to be easy to do the math. So I'm going to go ahead and make the ring. Don't have to get real fancy with this. And then you can just stitch a whole bunch of double stitches on your thread if you want to, but I like to kind of do a simple pattern. It gives me a better idea, because with needle tatting you have to tie a knot. So I mean, all those things take up a little bit of thread. So I'm not gonna go ahead and measure my thread now. I could. So let's do a chain. I'm all turned around here. Do a chain of 10 stitches. It's hard to do this on camera. Everything's hard to do on camera. See, and I'm already coming up to that first black dot that I made. There it is right there. There's my second dot. So I've already used that much thread. That started out at 10 inches. So just for that first ring, I've used up quite a bit of ball thread. I'm just going to go ahead and do a picot. So you could actually stop after this chain and calculate your thread over 20 stitches, but the more stitches you do, the better your calculation, or the more accurate your calculation will be. So I'm going to go ahead, I made another ring instead of a chain. Sorry about that. We'll leave it, we'll keep it. Can't talk and do this at the same time. That's the thing with shuttle tatting. You don't accidentally make rings when you really want a chain. But on needle tatting, you can easily close that up when you don't want to. You have to pay attention. So they each have their good points and bad points. I tend to reach for the shuttle first, but needle tatting to me is more relaxing, and unless you really know how to tat or an expert, you're never going to know the difference between needle tatting and shuttle tatting. It took me a long time to learn how to use the shuttle. All right. So that's going to be a 10 stitch chain if I don't accidentally close it up. I like to leave my finger in there till the very end. Alright, so that's an ugly little pattern here, but you can see I have quite a bit of needle thread left, and that's 10, 20, 30 stitches plus 2 or 3 picots, so you could count the picots as 2 stitches each and then do the math. So I can go ahead and unthread my needle and measure how much of the needle thread I have left. So that's 10. I've only used about 2 inches of the needle thread, but on the ball thread, this is all I have left to my second dot. And so I only have 6 inches left. So I've used up 14 inches just for these 30 stitches with some picots. But most of the time I don't worry if I know my ball has enough yarn, I don't worry about how much ball thread I'm using. But I do want to have a good enough tail for small motifs that I'm making so that I don't waste a lot of thread. And then if it's going to be a large project, I'll just put as much as I can handle, like a yard. I'll put a yard on my needle thread. So that'll give you an idea if you're doing small projects and you don't want to waste a lot of needle thread. Sometimes I overdo it, and then I have to cut away and throw away quite a bit of thread. So that's how you do it. And again, you have to allow for the needle, and I call this the working part of the yarn. You're probably not going to use this up because you just can't maneuver your needle if this part gets too short. But you're going to want to try to have enough from here to here to do a small motif without having to add thread very often. If it's a larger project, just go put enough length on your thread that you can handle without making a lot of knots. So I hope this helps. And you can do the same method on shuttle tatting, measuring how many stitches to the inch, and that will help you with your project. So if I was following a pattern, I would look at the pattern or a chart and see how many double stitches on each little element, how many picots, and then just kind of work up a little worksheet on that. So after I've done a stitch gauge on the size thread that I plan on using, this is kind of how my worksheet would look like. So what we did was 2 rings and a chain that totaled to 30 double stitches, and plus I added 3 small picots, so I'm counting 2 stitches per picot depending on the size of your picot. So you can adjust this figure as needed, but I'm going to count that as 6 double stitches. So I'm going to use my calculation based on 36 stitches. So I figured out after I had started with the 20 inches of ball thread, I had 6 inches left, so I know I used 14 inches of the ball thread. And on the needle thread, the same way, I know I only used 2 inches. So I take the 2 and I divide by the 36 stitches, and I come up with approximately 0.06 inches per stitch. And the same thing on the ball thread, it's 14 divided by the 36 stitches, and this is the calculation I would use for the ball thread. So I usually just round that number down to 2 digits. So I take this figure that I've come up for my stitch gauge, just like if you're doing a knitting or crochet project, I would figure out how many rings and chains I have and picots on my project and put that number in here, and I would multiply that times 0.06 for the needle thread. But remember, we have to have a little bit of working thread to accommodate the needle, so add a little bit extra to that figure that you're going to use on your needle. But for the ball thread, if you're just trying to figure out if you have enough left on the ball, you would just take the same number of stitches in the project and multiply that times whatever figure you came up with on your stitch gauge. And it's pretty easy to do. And I would just make some little index cards, or I keep these figures in my computer so that I can refer to them. And that's how I do that. And I'd also put down whether I did this with a shuttle or if I did it with needle tatting.